Today we are going to look again at several middle game positions, and excuse me, start with this one, and we're going to talk about several ideas. Mainly in middle games, we're going to look for what do we want, how do we achieve something that we desire from a middle game position, what to look for in the middle game position, how to know what fits and what doesn't, what's realistically achievable and what's not, and that will be a topic for today. But before we do the several positions that I've prepared, and also of course as always we are going to end with kind of an aesthetic composition, which is not necessarily super instructive maybe, but it's definitely going to be something cute that brings kind of a smile and appreciation to the imagination. But before we do that, there's some themes that I'd like to talk to you about. This is a position that I show a lot of my students. Again, I don't want to make to spend too much time on those that are going to be like 3 warm-ups, but I can usually I let my students or my listeners try to solve it, but here I prefer to show it to you. When you look at this position, of course, as far as king safety, both kings are not very safe. This king is completely exposed, and this king again is not exactly a picture of safety beyond some fortress. So that's something to keep in mind. You'll notice that immediately there's not something that you can do at once, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Now we know it's black to move. So we look at this position, again, by brute force, it's going to be awfully hard to find a solution. Very, very hard. You have to think about it logically. So you have to think what is worth mentioning about the position. When you take a deep look at it, and again, this is usually for much higher rated players, so bear with me, you notice that the white queen is not very good. It has many legal moves, but notice how most of them are cancelled out. I can't go here, and I can't go here, and I can't go here or here. I can't take, I can't go here or here or here or here. Many of the queen moves are gone. So the first instinct then, in the back of your mind, you should have an instinct, can I do something about a queen that has not many moves? And of course then many say, rook a8, look at this beautiful thing. I'm going to play rook a8. The only move right now for the queen is going to be queen to b6. And then I'm going to play rook to a6. And where is the queen going? Nowhere. The queen got mated, right? How beautiful. But, again, and I promise you this is for much higher rated players, so it's much more complicated than that. So then we think to ourselves, well, we have a small problem. Because after rook a8, queen b6, rook a6, white has a saving move. He realizes that his queen can't move. Okay, fair enough. But can he generate a threat of his own? Right? Just because our queen is under attack doesn't mean that we are obligated to move it. Can we try to counterattack something of equal or better strength? So are we using our imagination? Black has played rook a8. I on purpose don't want to move the pieces. Well, I can move the pieces, but you're going to see the correct move. That's going to kind of spoil the solution. So rook a8, queen b6, rook to a6 attacking the queen. And now we're thinking, as white, we're about to lose a queen. Life doesn't look good. What can we play? We have a move, and the move is rook to d1. Rook to d1, what a shocker. All right, so we go here, queen b6, rook a6, rook d1. This is fantastic. White is saving the game. Why? If you take the queen, I will take yours. If you take my rook, I'm going to take your bishop with check and win the rook on top of it. Is that understandable for everybody? Okay, that looks reasonable, right? Yeah. So then we go to the drawing board and we think to ourselves something in the position is wrong. And this is when we play kind of an in-between move. Rook to h8 check. What is the point of this move? The point of this move is to lure the king here, only move, and now continue with our plan. What is the difference? After here, we win the queen, because after here, notice that there's no longer rook d1, because queen takes d1 comes with check, and the queen is gone. But the point is, again, that sometimes in a position, you see a solution, you see that there's a workaround for a problem, and then white has a resource of his own. In this position, changing one little detail in the position made all the difference. That's understandable? Okay. Now let me show you position number 2. And position number 2 is kind of a tricky one. This one I will try to let you solve by yourself. White to move, what is his best continuation? What should he do? I'm going to give you between 30 and 60 seconds. I know it's not a lot of time, but we have just 1 hour class. And we have lots to see today. And the question is, white to move, what would you play? You look at the position, I'm going to run my thoughts with you as you are thinking about it. We look at the position, we see the black king is really exposed, really looking weak. The white king is also not superb, but he is still shielded by his pawns and pieces, not even 1 check for black, that's not bad. So we think to ourselves, what should we do? Instinctively, what piece are you trying to move in your analysis? What do you think?
The white queen to check.
Okay, the queen to check, and the king is going to go to the corner. And the queen alone cannot win the game, right? So you can play, you see you have a perpetual check, for example. Just to point out, check, king to the corner, check, king comes out, so forth, so on and so forth. So draw we have at hand, but the question, do we have more? So normally when you see a position where a queen is dominating a king and you know the queen alone is not going to work out, everybody I showed this position to, without exception, is thinking of moving the rook. Everybody is dying to get somehow the rook to give checkmate, because that's going to be mate. There's only one problem. The rook can't cross. If you go to d3, you cannot pass. If you go to d4, you are stuck in a wall. On d5, I'm just going to take you with my bishop. And if you go to d6, again, even if the queen moves, the rook cannot come to g6. So the rook cannot come to the g file. This is where we have to combine pattern recognition with reality. So the pattern recognition says, hey, the rook has to be lifted and we have to give checkmate. When you take a closer look at the position, you realize that is not feasible. Then you have to start thinking out of the box. You have to say to yourself, okay, if I cannot do the usual rook lift and cross, then what can I do? Well, in this position, the way to solve it is again to use a little bit of imagination. Try to envision the position. Right now, when I'm looking at the position, I'm thinking to myself, the king's unsafety is one feature, but the disharmony among the black pieces is screaming. We have a king on this side, the queen is somewhere in Honolulu, the bishop is in another place, and the king and the rook right now are united. But think about it, when I give a check and the king goes to the corner, all 4 pieces are like 4 lost sheep right in the field. And to the experienced player, that's like blood to a shark. That immediately comes into play here. So the solution, queen to g5 check, king h8, notice how all the pieces are loose, queen e7, bye-bye. The queen is attacking the rook, the queen is attacking the bishop. If the rook pretends to defend the bishop, queen e5 check is going to fork it. Black is losing material and the game. Again, even if it's hard, and if you say, whoa, I don't know if I would have solved it. I don't care if you would have solved it. That's not the point of the lesson. The point of the lesson is to try to think outside of the regular realms of what we know. We know that there's an attack. If you try to break your head on the wall, trying to lift the rook and try to make it work, it's not going to work. So you have to kind of release that thought from your head. You've tried it enough, it doesn't work. You gave it the good call, try. Now we have to look what else exists in the position. And when you realize that after the check, the 4 pieces are like 4 random items in the field doing nothing, then you might find that a double attack, a fork, is going to win the game. Clear? Then on we go. Position number 3, and then we're going to look at the middle game position that I've prepared. This is another game that a position that I really love showing my students at all levels. White to move and win. When you look at the position, you realize that king safety plays a small part here. Right now, the white king is protected by the pawns, but notice that the rook is tied down to defend the pawn. Otherwise, the queen is going to take here. The queen and the rook on the 7th rank is going to take the pawn. It's going to be checkmate. The black king is defended on one hand, but also a bit unsafe. Right? But right now we see that it's not the end of the world. Even if the queen gets here with a check, the white queen, the black king can come here and protect from the check, block. So there's not going to be like immediate mate or anything. The more we look at the position, we see there's no immediate mate. And then we think to ourselves, if we're white, how are we going to win the game? How? Are we going to win a piece here? Like loose pieces like we saw before in the example before? Not very likely. Notice that unlike before, here the king and the rook are tied. the queen and the rook are defending one another. Yeah, we see that this is not the case. There's loose pieces. They're going to create a fork and win. So that motif is kind of out of our mind. When we look at the position closely, we have to ask ourselves, what is our ace in the hole here? Who could tell me? Everybody sees it. It's like, even if you brought anybody from the club, you'd see that d6 pawn looks like a monster pawn. It's two moves away from queening. Who even cares that black is up a pawn here? So the most natural thing to do in our mind, because we can move the pieces in a regular game, is to play d7. And at first this looks glamorous. I'm about to queen the pawn. Life is good. But what will black play? Everybody sees it. Rook d2. Fantastic. The rook is blocking the queening square, and now both rooks are attacking the pawn. The pawn is bye-bye. Terrible decision. Terrible.
So,
wait, let me just lead. I'm trying to guide, and yeah, if you have it's a question or say something.
I was going to suggest a move.
Okay,
I wanted to ask first before.
Okay, let me just run with it, and if it was an answer, I promise to go back. So in this position, the natural move next to pushing it immediately is the more patient rook to d1. I can't move this rook because my rook is tied on. So rook to d1, and now I'm good and ready to play d7 proudly and queen the pawn. Unfortunately, after rook d1, black has the very same move that he had before. Rook d2. Very annoying. Then some tactical eye players say, you know what? I can't do it by regular means, let me do it by artificial means. Let me play queen e7. What a monster little move. Because if the rook takes, the pawn takes, and queening the pawn is inevitable. And of course they're very happy and impressed until they see that once again, rook d2, very calm little move, and what the heck? It just doesn't work. You can give a check, I will block the check with my queen. There's just no mate. And there's no way to queen the pawn. Black is just in the way. Sooner or later, when you analyze things like this properly, you do it by different move orders. Doesn't matter if you first want to push the pawn or first want to guard the pawn. You realize that something here needs to be changed. Something in the position has to change, or else we are not going to bring the point home. Did you want to suggest?
I was going to suggest the rook d1, and you just refuted it.
Okay, very good. Yeah, again, I mean, this is where we're doing something that's a little more, a little tricky. The normal means somehow don't work, and that will teach us how to build. So now you think to yourself, what do I need to change in the position? I need to change the position somehow. Now, again, queen f6, the problem is that I'm going to go rook d2 again. And every time you give me a check, notice that my queen is just good and ready to come back here. So there's no mate. I can't mate the king, unfortunately. It's all about this pawn. So what do I need to do? I need to change, to shift something from the position. I need to kind of rock the boat, rock the equilibrium.
Queen
Queen where?
a2.
It's very, queen takes to here?
Yeah.
Okay, so queen takes.
So then you move up the rook to the...
Rook to d1,
Yeah.
but then my rook comes here and blocks it. I just don't let the pawn advance. Good try. Listen, it may not work, but this is the kind of stuff I want you to look at. I want you to look at the absurd. I want you to look at the abstract. Here you'll see that sometimes you'll need fancy means. A sacrifice, a shocking move, a counterintuitive move. Here you have just a simple need to change the character of the position. Because what was the common denominator in all the defenses? Rook d2, rook d2, rook d2. I push the pawn, the rook comes here. I try to support it, the rook comes here. I try to be fancy and sack my queen, he doesn't take it, the rook just comes here. And why? Because the rook is just perfect. The queen is supporting you right from here. So annoying. I need to do something in the position, some shift, and white plays the correct. Rook b to e1. Attacking the queen, and now something changes in the position. Notice, like you noticed correctly, that the queen was attacking the rook. Right now the queen is defending it, but the queen can go far. I can play queen f3 or something. So you must play some move like, let's say, queen c2, queen b2, whatever, something like this. But now the queen is in front of the rook, all of a sudden. And now my move d7 or rook to d1 just wins the game. No longer can you play rook d2. I took that away from you. So for example, if I went, let's say, here, how are you stopping the pawn? You're not. If I played here, how are you stopping the pawn? If you use the queen and I put the rook behind it, problem. That's not the rook on d2, that is the queen on d2. You're going to lose a lot of material now. So one tiny change in the position and the point comes home. Yes, question or comment? Okay. Now we're going to look at some very, very interesting stuff, in my opinion. Okay, we have a position of a middle game position from here, and I can tell you that this position is with black to move. Thank goodness, otherwise white would win in basically one move. And I want you guys to take a minute. Again, I'm being very unfair, giving you only 60 seconds. That's not reasonable in this position. So many options, so the position is so asymmetric. So we have to think to ourselves, what are we going to play if we are black? We are facing a disaster on c7. Right? If white goes knight b c7, well, that's not good for the home team. So as black, we need to think to ourselves what we want to do. But we don't just want to be robotic and automatically just respond to the threat. We also want to achieve our goals. So we want to combine paying attention to the opponent's threats, and at the very same time, we want to be able to try to use our imagination and think, what would we like to see change in the position? And especially I want you to pay close attention to good pieces and bad pieces, and maybe that's going to help a little bit. So I'm going to hush up for 60 seconds, or maybe a little less, whatever. Try to figure out, come up with a plan, or start forming a plan here from black's point of view. Any ideas? Anybody has something in their mind? I know I do not give you a lot of time, and I know these are hard. The point is not to solve, it's not a contest. The point is to leave that position with a feeling that, wow, I understood what happened here. So the double threat is again on c7. White wants to take, winning a lot of material. We have to do something about it. Also, that's the threat. Now let's try to use our dream. We'll look at the pieces and we think to ourselves, which one are good pieces and which ones are bad pieces? And you think to yourself, if I had to choose of the minor pieces of the white piece, which is the weakest white minor piece? What do you think? Of the 4 pieces on the board, this, and this, which one is the weakest right now? Or the least active, or the one that looks with the least scope? What do you think?
White bishop.
We're talking about the minor pieces, just knights and bishops.
Light square bishop.
The light square bishop on g2 looks dormant. He is behind his own pawns, and we don't see much scope to it right now. Okay, how about when you look at the black pieces? Which one right now is the best black piece, right this second? Is it the bishop on d7? Doesn't look like it. I can't disagree. That looks like a really well-placed knight, right? Okay, this is something to keep in mind. Now black combines getting rid of the threat with the idea of trying to leave himself with a good piece against a bad piece. Step number 1, knight takes d5, eliminating the double attack on the c7 square. This has to be played. Now in the game white played, of course you cannot take with a c-pawn. The knight is loose. If you take with the rook and I go something like bishop to c6, then e4 is going to become a bit loose. So he took on here. Step number 2, bishop takes b5. Again, the knight on b5 is a relatively good piece. Maybe you can even hop to d4. And the bishop on d7 is not super impressive. Let's get rid of it. Okay, step 2. We already took 2 very, very good steps towards leaving black with a good knight on c5 and the silly white bishop on g2. Even the capture of the pawn that gave him an extra square didn't leave the bishop impressive, right? He is basically looking at his own pawn here and his own pawn here. Not very good. But now we know that this bishop is eyeing that knight. Maybe he's going to capture it at some moment. How do we continue? What do we do on the dark squares now? We need to take some operation, in my opinion, to try to keep white busy a little bit here.
Pawn f3.
Very good. Pawn to a3. Excellent. Well, the immediate threat is, of course, pawn takes pawn, attacking rook a1. When the rook moves, we're going to take on a2. Black is just going to win material. It's going to be great. Now, in this position, well, I can't really blame white. He really didn't like losing the pawn, so he decided to avoid it. I will tell you that he probably should have played something different, but before we go with this, I wanted to mention a move that's also suggested often by my students, and that is kind of in the spirit of Grandmaster Petrosian, who was a world champion, and that is rook takes bishop. I have to at least touch the subject. This is also a very, very valid move, I have to admit. After pawn takes, you can play bishop to e5. This is very, very strong. Notice that black gave up a rook for a knight, for a bishop, basically an exchange. Right now we see each side as a bishop and black has an extra knight. And now the threat is to play something like h4, working on the very weak pawn on g3. Of course, if you play h4, my queen is going to hop to g4, hitting not only the pawn here that's going to be pinned, and also the pawn on g3. Black has a lot of compensation here. A lot. This is definitely worth playing. But black decided not to invest the material, and instead played the move a3 with a threat on the b pawn. Here, if white was smart, he would say that he would prefer activity and some counter chances to being even on material. And in the game, he went bishop to d4. I think that maybe the move b4 would have been more challenging. The point is, after bishop a1, b takes c5, at least there's some play. Here, the 3 pawns and 2 bishops, at least in the threat on this bishop, so the bishop has to move. And not so easy to play like bishop here, because there's later on is going to be an f4. Here, there is counterplay, definitely. But of course, black is for choice. You know, material is material, and exchange is an exchange. So, in the game, he didn't want to do that, and he decided to play bishop to d4 to counter the attack on the b2 pawn. So, well, black obliged by taking the bishop, taking. Now, before the pawn gets to b4 and chases our knight, we're eliminating it, and the queen takes. What happened? In a sequence of moves, we have managed to get our dream position. A good knight versus a very passive bishop. Also, the 2 open files, I mean the 1 open file and the 1 semi-open file that's our both occupying. For a moment I thought that the girl was here. So, are occupied by black, and black is much better. Let's take a look at how the game continues. And again, I'm not saying that white played a masterpiece here, but it's to illustrate the point of how difficult it is to play with white. First of all, black played b6, because in this position, maybe white is going to play b6, try to ruin the structure. So, black played b6, accentuating the strength of the knight on c5. Okay, white retreated with the rook is doing nothing on d4. Queen f5, improving the position of the queen. Rook e2 trying to challenge on the file. And now, knight to d3. Rook takes, queen c2, pinning the knight to the queen. But black simply conquers the file and slides away from the pin. Queen e5, notice that he's attacking the rook on a1. Again, something we discussed before. When you can generate a bigger threat than your opponent, you don't have to just respond to his. There was a pin on the knight, a bit of discomfort. You thought, hey, maybe I should move the knight, but right now I'm attacking a rook. When the rook moved, the knight went back to c5. We can see again the advantage that black has. Better minor piece, controlling the file. Very, very nice. Okay, in this position, you can see that black has many ideas in mind. One of which is to play the move h4. And then he will take on g3, and not only will the white king look bad, but the second rank is going to look bad. So it was between not allowing the piece to jump to the second rank or stopping h4. Maybe he should have played rook d2 to stop queen e2 that was played in the game, but I think that after h4, black is really in good shape. So in the game, he went h4, queen e2. Of course, I'm threatening the queen. I'm also threatening the pawn on f2 if you move. He played, okay, I'm showing a variation where if queen takes e2, takes, wins a pawn. Oops. So he played queen d2, queen takes b5. The first pawn falls. And now rook e2 is threatened. So rook e1, takes, queen b2. Very, very active. Notice that the idea now, if the queen goes around pawn hunting, the idea is to take the pawn on f2, then follow it with knight d3 and knight e1, and the pin against the bishop is going to prove decisive. So white tries f4, king f8, simply preventing queen e7, f5, queen e5. Again, the rest is just simple matter of technique. Maybe white thought that if he wins the pawn on h5, his bishop is going to be useful. But again, simple moves. Knight e4, knight c3, knight takes a2, and, well, at some point here, white resigned. He realized that he cannot do anything, and the black pawns are just going to march in. So, very, very quickly, if to go back to the initial position, we looked at the position where white was having definitely lots of threats. The knight and the bishop and the two knights were attacking c7. It was not easy to play a move like c6 because of knight takes pawn, knight b6. I mean, the knights are just hopping everywhere. So, eliminating one knight, eliminating the other, and again, playing for the idea of leaving black with a good piece against white's bad piece. It's up on top. O'Kelly, white, Najdorf, black. So the player with the black piece is Miguel Najdorf. Some of you might know him from the Najdorf opening in the Sicilian. And O'Kelly was also a grandmaster, right? Or probably a Belgian grandmaster.
Probably was Interzonal Beverweight.
That's Dubrovnik, yeah. Tournament in the 50s. All right, next position. And actually, I'm going to show you a position from my own game. I don't often do that. But this was just a position that was published in many magazines. I lost too, don't think I'm bragging. And it's a very, very nice position.
Golfing?
Almost. This is my game against Joel Benjamin from about 20 years ago. I played him several times, and this was one of the more painful ones, I can tell you. We look at the position. I'm sure you can see just by optically looking at it that white has a better position for several reasons. Okay, first of all, king safety. The black king is not super safe. It's not easy to get to it, but there can be lines where it can be easily punished. For example, if let's say this rook wants to ever return to the second rank, black has to reckon with a move like rook takes g6, pawn takes g6, rook h8 mate. So there's some issue about the dark squares in the king. This king is very well placed in the center, very strong. We know that kings are active pieces in the endgame. And on top of it, white has a passed a-pawn that, again, in many endings could be a big problem. Black, on the other hand, is doing his best trying to nag. You know, not really anything concrete. He's kind of in a sit-and-wait mentality. So in this position, white played a very energetic move, king c5. And again, at first when you look at this move, you think to yourself, natural move. The c6 pawn is a terrible weakness. After the king takes it, the rook is going to be attacked. And then what to do? Maybe the king is going to march in, take more pawns. Looks really, really, really bad for the second player. But I was really waiting for this opportunity. And the question is, what should black play in this position? Again, you look in the position, it looks really dire. The white rooks are very strongly aimed on the h-file. The f5 rook looks very clumsy. The bishop on e5 looks monstrous compared to its compatriot on f1. You know, again, any ending with a passed a-pawn looks really grim. So we need to really start using our imagination and to be resourceful here. And the funny thing is that this is not the position that you can kind of find move by move. This is the kind of position that you really have to think like with some sort of a flow. There's got to be a plan. You can't just try, oh, I'll play this move and then see what happens and then try to respond. You have to think it's a calculation exercise as well as an exercise in resourcefulness. Well, again, this is a pretty tough one, and again, unfortunately, we don't have hours that we can just let you analyze and analyze. I'm going to show you. Again, it's not about solving, it's about learning. Here, black played the move d4. At first, the move looks like it's completely crazy, because what does this have to do with the pawn on c6? And it looks like the white threats are more immediate. So, the game, now by the way, the game has to continue. White cannot go back. He has to go with the following continuation. So, king took on c6, attacking my rook. And now what do you think I did? I'm sure that some already see it. d3, exactly. King takes rook, all forced. There's no way to stop the pawn anyways. He's got a, having said A, he has to say B. d2. I'm about to queen with check. And now he took on h7. Okay, so far we understand what's going on, I hope. Black has sacrificed the rook, but he can queen his pawn. White, on the other hand, has monstrous mating threats. So for example, I'm sure that some of you already see that if I queen the pawn, I'm going to have an extra queen, but one less king. So d1 queen, king e7, with a million mates. This is going to be mate, this is going to be mate. I cannot stop the mate. Similarly, on something like bishop b5, just king e7, again, doesn't. So what would you play here in this position? What do you think needs to be done here?
Rook f7.
Yeah, after rook f7, check, rook takes, king takes, and white can give a perpetual check. Rook h7, king g8, rook h8, king f7. The game would have ended properly with perpetual check. You can say that black kind of stole the draw because king c5 was inaccurate, allowed d4, and yeah. Okay, now my question to you is, what do you do in the case of rook h5? I can tell you what happened here. My opponent had maybe 1 minute in sudden death. And I said to myself, I knew that he really wanted to beat me because he was better the whole game. Also, he's much higher rated than me. But I felt, maybe I can trick him by playing a move like rook h5. I knew that he will still have the perpetual, but I thought that maybe it's going to inspire him to look, maybe he's going to lose on time in his searches to find something else. Maybe he's going to try to push and not have anything. Sometimes, you look for more and you find less. That was that example. So I played this move. 2 question marks, losing immediately. But to find this move with the minute on your clock, that is very, very nice. So I'm going to show you what he did. And again, this is also a lesson in really beautiful checkmating net. He took, forced, takes, and I was kind of happy here because I didn't see the next move. I thought to myself, well, by taking now there's no perpetual. I thought that in this position he's going to be forced to play rook h8. And if he goes king f7, I keep checking. If he takes, so then I take. Again, perpetual check. But, so at first I was happy to see this move, but then he played this move. And now I wasn't happy. Because now I had a lot of time on my clock to realize that I'm getting mated. I can't escape. Well, there's way to escape the mate, as you will see, but the price is just too big. Again, if I make a queen, king e7, and rook h8 is going to be awfully hard to stop. So I tried to get out with my king, and he played check. Again, very, very strong. King here, king e7. The move that I missed, by the way, when I played rook h5, but I played king f7, because now I thought to myself, if queen, but then he plays rook h6. Just returning and rook h8 checkmate. I can't do anything. So I must exit, and then he played check, king here. King h6 is basically very, very similar, but okay, here, f5 check, king moves, or takes, king moves is the same thing. Check, here, and here. Stops the pawn. So white won. Yeah. All right.
When Joel played king c5, what did he miss? You saw d4, d3, d2?
No, didn't see any of it. Didn't see any of it. He just thought, well, I mean, he was a bit short on time, but not. He started thinking after I played d4.
Yeah.
That's where he spent all his time. But I was really hoping for it. But then in the game, I was over smart. Sometimes it's not good to be over smart.
Advanced French?
Advanced French. Okay, guys. One more middle game position, and then we are going to see one very aesthetic problem, as promised. This one is number 5. Okay. Here we have a position between a player that I've never heard of, Michel by white, and Aron Nimzowitsch, who is a very famous grandmaster, not a grandmaster, but a very famous master of the past. In those years, there were no titles. But I'm assuming that any tournament where somebody gets to play Aron Nimzowitsch, the guy has to be at least of some level. Has to be at least a strong master, or else he would never be in a tournament like this. Also, the position that he got, even though he was white here, is not so bad. As a matter of fact, when you look at the position, you see that maybe white is one move behind in development, but if it's his move, and if he just moved the bishop out, then I think that he would have reasonable chances to make a draw. Maybe this game will never be known, and just in the record books. Instead, white played the logical move rook e1. Tempo over the queen, developing the rook to an open file, that seems logical. But in my opinion, this was an inaccuracy. I think that the analysis showed that it's correct. You will see it yourself. And from this point on, let's try to pretend that we are black. Let's try to see what can we create from a position that really has almost no life to it. It looks like there are no weaknesses. The pawn structure is similar. 2 against 2 on the queen side, 3 against 3 on the king side. No king safety issues right now. Right? It looks like. There's no mate or anything. And just like one move behind in development. And again, I'm not going to say that white played like Carlsen or Kasparov in this game. But the point was not to prove that this is now winning for black. I'm not saying this is black to move and win. This is how to try to maximize a position from a given moment. So what do you think is the first move? Let's see if we can find it move by move. What is black's first move? His queen is being attacked. What to play? Yes?
Rook A, D8.
Okay, he moved his rook from F, but you get the point. Okay, again, many of you, and again, this is something that I'm trying to unroot a lot, is the automatic move is, okay, where can I move my queen? I see it here in the club, I see it with my kids, the queen is being attacked, the hand is already on the queen, just thinking, where am I going to move it to? And there's like no openness to anything else. Remember what we said before, bigger threat, ignore the opponent. And here he found a super bigger threat. This is the beginning of white having to make some compromises. Notice that you cannot take the queen, you're going to lose yours with a checkmate. Even if you try to sack your queen first, there's the same consequence. And not only that, the queen has to babysit that rook that's being attacked by this queen. So instead of gaining a tempo, all of a sudden white has some questions to answer. He has only one move in this position, bishop to d2. Already we can see that black made a very nice step towards some advantage. There's a pin against the bishop on the d file, and that's going to cost some time. Okay, now our queen is under attack, and we cannot generate a bigger threat. We might as well move it. Where to? Instinctively, maybe you want to move it to f6. Why? You move it out of the way, and you tickle the pawn on b2. But the problem is, if I make a move like, let's say, queen c1, and then bishop comes to c3 and re-attacking the queen, I think that is not so good. I think that immediately white is going to regain the tempo. We want to move the queen to a safer spot. Also, we want to think towards the future. We want to look at what weak squares are in the white army and how perhaps we can bring our pieces and conquer them. So he plays queen f5. Very good. All right. Now, this pin is really unbearable. Right? We can all agree that this pin is just you cannot just keep making moves with that pin. Sooner or later, you're going to have to break it. That's something to keep in mind. But where to go? You know, you can't play queen c2. You'd love to play it, but you can't. If you play queen e2, then maybe knight d4 is going to come, attacking the queen and threatening c2 square. Notice that the queen here is all over the light squares. There's a party around the light squares here. So he played rook to c1. The intention is to try to break the pin with queen c2. Just in time. Okay, now black continues with his initiative. Knight to e5. Again, recognizing that the d3 square is a very nice outpost. When the knight is going to be here, it's going to be like an octopus knight. Offense, defense, king side, queen side, right, left, and the white bishop is just going to be no match to it. All right, so queen c2 was played, trying to unpin. Knight d3. At first glance, it looks like we are forking two rooks, but notice that there is a pin against the queen. But this pawn is also under attack. My question to you now is, should we play rook e2, or must we play the passive rook f1? Again, you have to think in tactical means. I would love to go to e2 because that's the open file. Unfortunately, I can't afford to. It loses material. So I have to settle for f1. Let me see why. After rook e2, knight takes c1. All of a sudden, what do we say about relative pins? This is not an absolute pin. Just because there's a queen behind my knight doesn't mean that it's illegal to move it. So look what I'm taking. Taking one rook. Well, you can take back the knight, you'll be down in exchange. Alternatively, if you dare take my queen, I'm taking the other rook with check. When the king moves, I'm picking up the bishop. Well, I think that this is a pretty good deal from black's point of view, huh? Winning material and winning the game. So rook f1. Okay, here again, there are many possibilities. Many moves are decent here. You can play, for example, queen b5 is a good move, and there are all kinds of moves. Okay, he played here. Also a decent move, now attacking rook d1. So rook has to move. The rook to c1. So the rook had to move to d1. And again, black plays an interesting move, queen e2. We can already see that black is putting a lot of pressure on the white position. Notice that the king cannot move, the rook on f1 cannot move, the bishop on d2 cannot move, the queen on c2 cannot move far, and I don't think that the rook on d1 wants to move, because indirectly there's going to be super pressure. So it's like, what to play here? It's very, very difficult. White is trying to fight his best. He slides his queen back away. Queen to b1. Moving away from the pin so the bishop will finally be able to move. Rook d5. Again, a very interesting choice. The rook is lifted for two reasons. One, we want to activate the rook on c8, and there is no reason for us to bring it to the rook on a8, excuse me, and there's no reason to bring it to c8. It's much better to try to double rooks and emphasize the strength of this knight. The second one is for the rook to laterally perhaps move and do something against the white king. So, bishop e3, rook a8, rook d2, queen h5, the queen had to retreat, and rook d1. Well, it's mentioned that if bishop takes f7, knight takes knight f4, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, with a lot of initiative here. Threat already knight g2, rook g5, and according to the computer, black is better. So, he played rook fd1 in this position. And now black played, again, he realized that the element of time is not playing a dear price here. It's not a question that if you don't act now, something's going to happen. White cannot improve his position. That allows you time to slowly build. Step one, let's protect the pawn so in the future we don't have to think about it. And some of you might say, wait a minute, what's going on here? The knight looks like he's unpre. There are 3 attackers against it and only 2 defenders. But those of you who are here for the previous class already know of the motif called X-ray. And of course, if you play rook takes d3, queen takes d1, it's just a disaster. Loses material. So, what to do? White played the move f3. Okay, you can question White's strategy here, especially since it didn't work. But I think that it's very difficult to offer a good plan. If you play g3, I'm going to play very similar to the game again. I'm going to make sure that I create more and more weaknesses in the army. Well, you'll see what happened. So, f3. Now that there's no mate, the knight on d3 is attacked. So he played queen to g6. Again, anchoring the knight on d3. Notice the space advantage that black has, and the way that white has no counterplay, nothing to attack. That's going to allow us to play anything we feel like. So, queen c2. What else? h6. Okay, I admit that h5 immediately would have been probably more to the point, because he plays it in a second anyways. But again, in a Karpovian way, he wants to move his king from the bottom rank, from the back rank, to here, so there'll be no surprise check at some point, and so he could move this rook freely and operate with both rooks. Well, you'll see how. King f1, okay. King h7. Now, queen c3 was played. Again, I mentioned the variation that if g3, then queen f5. That's something very similar that happened in the game. Queen c3, rook d6. Every move, black improves the position at least a little bit. His king is more safe, no mating threats. The rook is now more aggressive. White is just marking time. Of course, he cannot create a pass pawn. This pawn is not exactly doing something, but okay, what else? h5. The pawn is already ready to advance. If I can, I might play h5, h4, and h3, softening the situation on the king side. If you take, I will definitely end up winning those pawns back. And if you play g3, then the whole position has been compromised on the light squares. White tries to stop it, but black just goes on, attacking the pawn on f3. Well, what to do? Maybe king g2 is the best move here. He tries to play king e2. I'm assuming that in the case of king g2, h4, again, very unappetizing. If g4, then h3. And, well, black, of course, is much better. So king e2, knight e5, big tempo. The pawn on f3 is being attacked, which is also indirectly defending the rook. So bishop f4. Rook takes d2. I'm not saying that black is playing the absolute best moves. If you put it in the computer, maybe he's going to have yet even improvements. But the idea is not to play a perfect game, but rather show you how slowly and surely black strategy from a position of nothing makes something of it. Already we can see that black just optically is better. So takes, and the tactics start to work. Rook c6. Tempo over the queen. He doesn't want to trade the second rook. Of course, if queen takes e5, the rook swings back to e6, pinning and winning. So, queen to d4, knight to g6, moving the attacked knight, threatening to take on f4, breaking the structure at some point. And again, the rest I'm going to play relatively fast, only because you can see that black is much better, safer king, much more active pieces, much better minor piece. This bishop is just not finding anything to attack, and the knight just jumps from color to color. So, bishop d6, queen h3, tickling the pawn on h2. The king is going up on a journey. Queen f1. I'm sure all can see that black is better. And, okay, in a series of few moves, okay, again, I'm not really doing it in depth because the point is not to analyze it. And again, we're running out of time, and I want to show you one more thing. The white king is very unsafe, and this just ends the game nicely. A nice little sacrifice. After bishop takes e7, c7, queen e7 is checkmate. So white had to resign. Again, if to remember the initial position, the first position of the game, we were here. White played one little inaccuracy. Black took over. And again, maybe there are ways to improve, but you can see how difficult it was for white to try to just complete his development properly. The black pieces just took over all the space. The knight landed on a super square d3, after which it was very hard to defend. Okay, guys, now, as a finale, I always like to show you something which is like more chess aesthetic than super instructive. And my good friend Yohanan Afek, he's a chess composer, chess IM, and is a IM in composition. He's a big time composer. And to his friend's 60th birthday in Holland, he composed the following problem. The way he did it, there was kind of a cute story, because that person is quite known, and many strong players came to his birthday party, birthday bash, and he showed this position as part of the entertainment. And in order for people to solve it, they had to have said just one thing. What is white's last move in the combination? That's all they had to find out. If you say it correctly, then you've solved it. If not, then you haven't. So again, this is a very tough position to solve. If I gave you enough time, maybe you'll get it. But just to understand, this is the white to move and win. And you notice that, in an exposed board, especially when the king is unsafe, the queen is going to have a million checks. So if you just try to win technically, it's not going to work. You have to start being a little bit inventive here. So again, I'm going to show it to you as like one piece of art. And yes, you want to try it? What is the last move?
C8 equals 9.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And I can tell you that in the party, I think it was, I hope I'm not giving credit to the wrong person, but I think that Grandmaster Erwin Lamy was the one that solved it. Then you are right. And if you are confused, well, I'll decipher. So rook a8 check. f8 queen check. This is all forced and checked by the computer. So he had to take the first one. Now the queen is being attacked. I suggest that you will take it. And now e7. And he has to take. Bishop to d5 check. Only legal move is king here. Rook to a8 check, sacking another rook. You must take it. c7 check with the bishop. You must go here, and like Ben said correctly, c8 knight, double equal check, forking the king and queen. And of course, bishop and knight win against the king, so white is going to win the game. Nice composition. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you guys have learned something, and I shall see you next week. Thanks.